All right, welcome back. We're working on authserver.net. So we've implemented authorization code flow and implicit flow. Now we're going to pick up the resource owner password credentials grant and then also the client credentials flow, which are the remaining two flows. And then we also need to write in the logic for our refresh tokens and in order to do the exchange. And then I have a few more things of work with adding third-party auth providers. We may need to add a consent page, but I'm not sure if consent is under OIDC. I haven't seen anything explicitly said in the OAuth framework regarding consent. And then we need to separate these packages to get ready to push them out onto NuGet. And then I need to have just some cleanup to clean up some tokens that we're not working with. I worked with Identity Server at my last job. I quit this summer. Don't know how they're handling with this whole Duende thing. Haven't asked. I'm assuming that if you're using it as a solution, like a proprietary solution, then people are probably going to just spend the money. So I don't think many people know that this is coming. So in here, we're going to start looking at our authorized controller. And I have these grants in here currently hard-coded. And I think we're going to change this so that this iterates over a entity. And that way you can add your own authorization codes. But let's just finish up the flow first. So in this flow, the resource owner password credentials grant is suitable where the resource owner has a trusted relationship with the client, such as a device operating system or a privileged application. This basically means that the application is going to capture the username and password, and then we're going to send that over to the token endpoint. And also used to migrate clients. Okay. This has a lot of security holes, so we try not to use this. The resource owner provides the client with its username and password. The client requests an access token from the authorization server's token endpoint by including the credentials received. So it's on the token endpoint. The authorization server authenticates the client and validates the resource owner credentials, and if valid, issues a token. The method through which the client obtains the resource credentials is beyond. Got it. Okay, so here we go. Grant type needs to be password. So there. Also, I have course, origin, I need to do a scope check. Let me check over here. So if we're doing all of this here, I need to verify scopes. There is no redirect URL. So that looks right. Okay. Username. So we need to have a token request here is a from the form, but there needs to be additional properties in this. Because I want this to be dynamic with what it is that we're passing in. We're not only going to have these credentials. This may be a different type of object entirely. So I could set up a custom formatter with Newtonsoft that would deserialize this based on what the request is. So if I look in here and I want to do ASP.NET Core x www form URL encoded, and I want to do this as a string parameter from form. So let's do a ASP.NET Core 3.1 polymorphic model binding. See, this is how a lot of people are doing it, is with this custom formatter. But where is it registering this? It's doing it actually right on the model. Okay, let's try that. That sounds interesting. So on this token request, I'm going to create a new folder called formatters. Oh, it's a converter. And I want to do a token request converter. And this needs to inherit from a JSON converter. So we don't want this one. We want the one from Newtonsoft. So in this one, we want to do a return type of T. Up here. Dot is assignable from my object type. I'm just pulling this straight out of the docs over here. Okay, for the read JSON, the write JSON we're going to have not implemented. And then for the read JSON, we're going to do this. We're going to load the J object and have a protected create in here. Like that. Okay, and now what I can do is I can make another class. What did I do? Come on. We're going to change this name to be a custom JSON converter. And now I'm going to make a new type, which is called a token JSON converter, which will inherit from the custom JSON converter of type token request. And it has this abstract method in it. And we're going to go ahead and just copy this stuff in here. My JObject K, F my JObject of the. Now I want to look at the token request here. And I want to say if my grant type dot toString is equal to password, then I want to return a new we're going to call it token RO password request. And in this, we want to include a username and a password. And then I want to put on this a data type password. And this is going to be a return new token RO password request. Otherwise, I just want to return the token request. Okay. So they were loading this as an attribute here. So on the token request, I can say JSON converter and it's a type of token JSON converter. Let's see if that works. So over here on my client, I'm going to copy the implicit controller. I'm going to call this RO password controller. And same thing here. We don't need this redirect or these logins or logouts for this one. So in this one, the only thing I want to do is we're going to make a post to here. So to do that, we're going to look at the auth code controller, and I'll bring that over here. And I'm first going to make this collection here where my grant type is password. My username is admin. My password would be password1. My scope, which is, we'll just say ID, which is going to be wrong. We need the client ID and the client secret. But these can be passed as so we're going to say var credentials equals convert to base 64 string of my encoding.getBytes. And I want to do that for the client ID, client secret. And we also want to use the HTTP client. And I want to do authorization, so headers and I think I can just do it like a client. Let's see, I want to say HTTP client ASP.NET Core 3.1 bearer token. I can't remember how to attach it. Okay, it was that way. So this, that, and then we're doing a bearer, and then we're passing in my credentials. When I look at this, we want to add in here a RO password, client ID, and client secret. And now what I want to do is I want to issue a post with this. So we're going to say var request equals new HTTP request message. And it's going to be a HTTP method called post. And I want to send this out to the globals.auth server URL /connect/token. And my headers well, we'll do that in a second. Let's do the content equals new form URL encoded content of my key value pairs. And then I want to get my result equals my await client.send asynchronous of my request. And this is a asynchronous task of an action result. If my result.isSuccess status code, then all I want to do is return OK. Otherwise, I want to return a bad request. Okay, more than likely, I can scrap the user manager, the sign-in manager. We need JWT tokens. Everything else looks right. Down here on the view for this, I need to have an index, which is here. And this is going to say RO password index. And we'll break right here. We don't need this redirect URL. We don't need the scope. Let's see what happens. It says build failed. Okay, we need to add in this. Test RO password client. And my secret's going to be this is a fake password for the RO password client. Now in my seed data, I need to add that. So down here, we're going to do a await data access layer dot create client asynchronous of a new client RO password. In my token controller, we receive the client. If my client.get type is not equal to a type of client RO password, then I want to do a unauthorized client. When this thing fails, doesn't have anything about it, so we can just say bad request. And we can say unauthorized client, like that. And then we want to do I want to look at my user service now. Like that. Find by name check password. So we're going to say var user equals await user manager dot get user asynchronous, which is actually a find by name. Now, if my token request is a token RO password request, and I can do this by the name here. Now, if my application user is equal to null, does not equal to null, then I want to say and if my check password of the user and the token RO password request dot password, then auth and return token. Otherwise, I just want to return a bad request here called, if I scroll up, access denied. Like that, okay? So in here, I want to do a return OK of my await JWT service. And I want to generate a token. And that's for the client. My token RO password request dot scopes. Like that. And we want to do a split by the space. And we also only want to say that if it's not null. My user.id and then my IP address. We also want to, if I look at my authorization controller, we want to take this CORS policy and scopes policy. CORS policy is good. Like that. I think we're ready to go. So over here, we needed to finish this up. So we have a project ID equals my initial project dot ID. We have a client ID equals my globals dot RO password client ID. A client secret equals my globals dot RO password client secret. We're going to say the token expiration minutes is 15. Issue refresh tokens is true. Refresh token expiration is 7. The issuer URI equals my globals.auth server URI. The audience we don't know because it's an RO password client. So we'll just leave audience off. We want to say validate audience is false. Validate issuer is true, and validate issuer signing key is true. And then down here, we're going to say RO password client. RO password doesn't have cores. So back over here in my token, we're going to move this here. There is no cores policy for RO password. This is if we want to create a scope. I'm not using any right now. And we don't have a redirect URL. So that should do it. So let's go into the database now in the dev server. And we'll delete it. And then we'll let everything start up. It'll automatically apply the migrations, load the client. And I want to go to RO password index. Okay, here we go. We got my credentials. We set the bearer token, send the request. It is not a valid request. So now what we're going to do is look at my token. Here we go. We got my bearer token. We get the credentials. That looks right. We get the client. That's right. Okay. Okay, so there it is. My token request that came in is not the right type. So is this token converter ever being hit here? No. So I want to use ASP.NET Core 3.1 custom JSON converter services. We need to see where that's registered. This one is using just write and read. So if I look at my custom converter here, I want to say ASP.NET Core use Newton soft JSON. Let's go ahead and install this on my package. Shit, I didn't mean to do that one. I need 3.1. Okay. Okay, let's try it again. That should do it, actually. Okay, now when I hit this, here. Okay, we get this back, and this is now a token request. Still never did this, did it? That's in services. Okay, that's not going to work. So let's try a different way before I do something else here. If I look at my token controller, in here, where you're doing, let's first go back to services and get rid of this. And then instead of using this one, let's go to this. And then for this one, instead of using Newtonsoft, we want to switch this to do create. Let's go ahead and pull everything out and just implement what we need to. Okay, we're going to forget this idea. And then back over here on the token controller, let's go ahead and run this. I want to take a look and see what my request is coming in. Maybe there's another way I can grab this easily. So when I look at this request, it's got a form with 3 keys. Wait. It's got a form with 3 keys on it. But you're sending this across as the credentials for your client. Which means that down here, you can say request.form dot first or default, where the key is equal to scope. We want to get the value. like that. Can you do a try get value of scope? Like that. Like that. And then I want to do a request.form.try_get_value of my username. So if you can't do this, or you can't get the request.form.try_get_value of password, then we're going to do a return a bad request, access denied. I think that was one of them, right? Yeah. Here I want to say string is not null or white space of scope. And I want to return that. Otherwise, I want to return string.empty or just null. Let's try it again. Okay, we got the username and password. We get the user. It's found. We check the password. We generate the token. So now that that all worked, back over here, I want to say response equals await result.content.read as string. And then here we want to put the response. And you just want to do the view. And I could say model is just a string. And right here I can do a think I can just do that, right? No, I think I need to do a... Let's make a quick model for this. It's going to be called the token response. And you want to do access token. And then you want to do a at model dot access token. So I just forget how to do this. I haven't used this in a long time. Razor display model value. Thank you. At model capital access token. Let's run it again. Whoops. Over here, we want to do a over here, I want to do a JSON convert dot deserialize object of type token response of this. Try it again. There we go. And here's our access token. Now, if I was to take this over and do a JSON, sorry, it's a JWT code, we can see that we indeed have everything that we were hoping for. Okay. So that one's, I think, done. Let's go ahead and take a look at the protocols. So the response needs to have state. Is that all of them? So this one only wanted me to include state. On this response token. So that means that here, if my request.form.try get value of state, then you're going to return OK of my JWT. Otherwise, I want to return a new, and this is going to be called a token RO password response. And we only want this to include state. Otherwise, we want to return a new token RO password response. Because I need to put this down here in this models. And I want to do the access token as my JWT.access token. Expires in equals JWT.expires in. Refresh token is JWT.refresh token. State is state, and then token type equals JWT.token type. That's it. Looks good. Perfect. Looks like that this response still wants me to, oh, here we go. So on implicit grant, it was required. So instead of doing this, I'm just going to move this over here, delete it. Which means that when we generate this, I want to include the state. So here, if my string is not null or white space of my state, then I want to do claims.add state. This one doesn't need state, so it's string dot empty. And this one here is just state. Like that. And then on the Authorized Controller, on the Login Controller, Implicit Flow, State. Like that. That's it. So let's go ahead and build and save this and push this to the repo. This doesn't look right. This one here needs to have the state from the Google response. Like that. And we'll rebuild that. We'll run it. $400. So we want to say string is null or white space of state. Then I want to return state. Otherwise, I want to return null. That's it. Same problem. I don't understand. Let's go ahead and rerun this. Oh, it's because we need to have an await. I was like, why isn't that working the way it was supposed to? That's weird. And there it is. So we can go ahead and move this into here, and we're good. Let's go ahead and tackle the last one real quick. So if I look here, this one's only using client credentials, which is just client ID and password. So it's just the grant type and scope. In this case, we're going to do a case called client credentials. Okay, I'm just thinking about how I'm going to scaffold this out for extensions. So in this client credentials here, we've already got scope and grant type. So if my client.getType does not equal to a type of client credentials, then I want to do return bad request, and this is called a unauthorized client. Then I want to verify the scopes. Okay. And that's it. And then down here, we just want to do a return OK of my await JWT service. I want this same thing except for this user ID is going to be null. Which means that in here, I want to say string is null or white space of my application user ID. Then we want to do this. Otherwise, I want to do just a new claims identity. And then this needs to make sure that when we request the token, it's hitting it is. And then we want to make sure that the there's no state on this one. And I need to register my client, which is in my seed data. So right here. And this is going to be called a client credentials. We're going to add one in here for the client credentials, client ID, client secret. Okay, project ID, client secret, issue refresh tokens, issuer URL. The audience. The audience which is being registered is client.audience. So in here we can say audience is equal to, and then down here we can say audience is equal to and when I look at my globals, we could say client credentials audience. And up here I can add RO password audience. Like that. Down here, we're going to add the client credentials. There's no course origin. We're not adding a scope, and there is no redirect URI. So finally, we're going to have another controller called a client credentials controller. And the only thing this is going to do is it's going to pass this like that. like that. You're going to pass this and then get back your return. Over here, we can copy this and just call this a client credentials. And we can run. Okay, we need to add in these variables here. So this one, we're going to say the audience is authserver.net.ro password. These three we can move up here, and I can say this is a test client credentials client. This one I can say this is a fake secret for the client credentials client. And this audience we can set to be authserver.net.client credentials. Now we will delete the database and let this reseed. Hey, there we go. We're going to send the request. Here's the response. We did get a response code, and here's our token. And I can go to a JWT decode, and we can take a look at this. There it is. Okay, so that is our 4 forms here. Let's have a new introspection controller here. If I look at the look at the monitor. Oh. And that was Anyways, what I wanted to look at here was the introspect to see what is being passed. Your introspect controller I'm doing that by just passing the token, but that's actually not right. So where I am, pull this over here, where I am loading a user in signal R, your I don't see me ever introspecting it. What about if I look at Ali chat? Public. I know it should be in here somewhere. Introspect access token. It wants me to know the client ID, the client secret, and the access token. And you're using the API name and the API secret. So what that means is we need to have a new model in here. And I'm going to call this a ResourceServer. And I want this to have on it a API name, or just a name, and then a secret. And a URI. And so in your introspection controller, I just want to have one if I look at this, I want to say introspection endpoint. So we want to have a public virtual void called introspect async. And we want this to pass in a token, a client ID, and a client secret. We want this to return scope, client ID, username for who authorized the token, and expiration. So we should have something called decode credentials, right? Which was on the Authorized Controller. Right here. So we can do a helpers.decode credentials of my token, of my, and I can do var bearer equals this. And this is going to return a API name and the API secret. And ultimately what I'm trying to get to is a private read-only JWT service called JWT service. And I want to do await JWT service dot validate token of my client ID, client secret, and the token. But I also need to have a data access layer in here like this. And in this, we need to add a new we're going to call it get resource servers asynchronous. And that's going to be for a client. And then this one is a get resource server asynchronous. And we want to do that again for the string API name. We'll call it name, and then the string for the secret. And this is a create resource server asynchronous. This is a update resource server asynchronous. And this is a delete resource server asynchronous. So when I look at my context, I want to add in here resource servers. And we want to get the ones where the client ID and then the client need to have a number of these resource servers. So for this one, I want to get the var base 64 encoded secret equals convert.to base 64 string, and it's going to be a encoding.utf8.get bytes of my secret. And we want to get the first one where the name is equal to the name and the x.secret is equal to the base 64 encoded secret, and it is active. Over here in the context, I want to put that web, it's called a resource server, has a index of the name, which is unique. And then you want to have another one, which is going to be for the name, the secret, the active flag. This one, we want to get the secret here and set this to be the secret. like that. If I look at my I think we want to do this again here. We're going to set the secret again here. Like that. Now when I look at this, I want to add in here a public string called secret decoded. And it's going to be a convert.from base64 string of my secret. And we want to do a encoding.get UTF-8.get string of this. So the first thing is we want to get var valid resource server equals await my data access layer dot get resource server of my credentials dot item 1 credentials dot item 2. If valid resource server is equal to null, then I want to return bad request. This is going to be a asynchronous task of an I action result. Now I want to get the client of my client ID. If my client is equal to null, or my client.id does not equal to my valid resource server.client.id, then I want to return a bad request. Otherwise, I want to validate this. You don't want to do it like this. You just want to return this as a bool. So if you can validate the token, then you want to return OK, and you'll change this up for what it needs to be in here, which is a introspection response. And we want to have a bool for active, a string for the scope, a string for the client ID, a username, and then a long for the expiration. The scope should be your what's on the token. Your client ID is client ID. Your expiration is on the token. Your username is admin. Active is true. Now you can do a JWT service.decode token of my token. And now I can do token So I want to get the first claim where the type is equal to scope. And now if my scope claim is equal to null, then we can say scope is equal to scope claim dot value. That one. Total seconds. So I want to get date, time, C#2 seconds. So can you do a date time offset dot to Unix time seconds? Let's just use these and put these over here in the helpers. This one here. We can just do a helpers like that. And we want to convert that to a long. And otherwise here we want to do a bad request. We want this one to be a HTTP GET and a allow anonymous. And we want to say the route is introspect. So now when I look at a client, we're going to specify the audience. And that looks pretty good. So we still have this grants controller. But we're in mostly pretty good shape. So let me make a commit here. And I want to say added client credentials and introspection endpoint. We'll stage everything and push that out. If I looked real quick at the introspection endpoint, when we are getting this resource server, I also want to pass in here the GUID for the client ID. Like that. Up here, we want to add in on this one a private read-only iGlobals. Same thing here. Like that. We don't have anything yet in the grants one, but that's okay. I think we're pretty good. So let's go ahead and make that one next commit here. Added additional check for introspection controller. And we'll commit that out. So when I look at my notes now, what I have remaining is we need to add in the refresh token endpoint, which is what we'll do when we get back. We added in Web API resources. We need to finish adding in our third-party auth. We only have Google in at the moment. Consent, I'm not sure if consent is OIDC or OAuth, so we're leaving that out for now. We want to separate these grants into entities. We want to separate our packages and then have a service to remove our expired tokens. So that's kind of what it is that we're working on next. So I'm going to take a break. I'll be back in 20 minutes. When we come back, we're going to add in the logic for a refresh token endpoint. Thanks for staying with me. I'll see you guys in just a little bit.